Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
I walked through my childhood home's front door, holding 8-year-old Emma's hand, while 6-year-old Tyler bounced excitedly beside me. The familiar smell of turkey and cinnamon filled the air, and golden autumn decorations lined the hallway walls. But the moment we stepped into the dining room where my extended family had gathered for our annual Thanksgiving brunch, my father Harold looked up from carving the ham, his face hardening into a cold expression I'd never seen before. With relatives watching in stunned silence, he set down his knife and delivered words that shattered my heart. This was meant to be a nice day. Why did you come? Emma tugged my sleeve, whispering why Grandpa looked so angry, while Tyler asked softly if we should leave. Fighting back tears, I squeezed their small hands and said the words that would change everything. Yes, right now. 3 months earlier, my life looked completely different. I was Dale Morrison, a 32-year-old construction foreman, working double shifts to keep my head above water after the messiest divorce in family history. Sarah, my ex-wife, had blindsided me 6 months prior when she announced she was leaving me for Marcus, her wealthy co-worker from the marketing firm where she'd recently started working. The divorce papers cited irreconcilable differences, but the real difference was that Marcus owned a downtown luxury condo while I lived paycheck to paycheck in a modest 2-bedroom apartment. Since the separation, I'd been juggling my regular job overseeing residential construction sites with weekend landscaping work to cover child support and maintain the lifestyle Emma and Tyler deserved. Every morning, I braided Emma's thick brown hair before school, helped Tyler practice his reading flashcards, and drove them to soccer practice in my aging pickup truck that I prayed would start each day. The evenings were the hardest, coming home exhausted to an empty apartment, microwaving dinner for one, and falling asleep on the couch, watching whatever cartoon movie reminded me of better times. I'd been looking forward to this Thanksgiving brunch for weeks. It represented normalcy, family connection, something bigger than the isolated bubble my children and I had been living in since Sarah moved out. I'd saved money from my landscaping jobs to buy thoughtful gifts for everyone: a gardening book for Aunt Patricia, premium coffee beans for Uncle Robert, art supplies for my teenage cousin Jenny. Emma wore her favorite purple dress with white tights, and Tyler sported his new button-down shirt that made him look like a miniature businessman. The planning had consumed me. I'd coached the kids on proper table manners, reminded them to say please and thank you, and explained how important it was to show Grandpa Harold and the rest of the family that we were doing just fine despite the changes in our lives. What I hadn't prepared for was walking into a room full of people who looked at me like I was a stranger, or worse, a threat. After Harold's devastating words, the dining room fell into uncomfortable silence. Aunt Patricia, a gentle woman in her 50s, who'd always been like a second mother to me, shifted uncomfortably in her chair and avoided eye contact. Uncle Robert, Harold's younger brother who'd taught me to fish when I was Tyler's age, suddenly found his coffee cup fascinating. My cousin Jenny, now 23, and married to a guy named Brad, whispered something to her husband that made him glance at me with obvious suspicion. The worst part was watching Emma and Tyler process their grandfather's rejection. Emma, who'd been chattering excitedly in the car about showing Grandpa the turkey drawing she'd made in art class, now stood frozen beside me with confusion written across her face. Tyler, who'd been practicing a poem he wanted to recite for the family, stepped behind my leg like he was trying to hide from something dangerous. My sister Linda appeared in the kitchen doorway, flour dusting her apron, and concern etched in her features. She'd always been my closest confidant, the one person who knew how much I'd sacrificed to keep my family together even after Sarah left. The look she gave me wasn't sympathy. It was guilt, like she knew something terrible that she couldn't bring herself to share. I managed to maintain my composure long enough to guide Emma and Tyler toward the front door, their small voices asking questions I couldn't answer. "Why was Grandpa mean to us, Daddy?" Emma asked as I helped her into her coat. "Did we do something wrong?" Tyler added, his bottom lip trembling with the effort of not crying. As we walked to my truck, I caught Linda following us onto the front porch. She called my name softly, and when I turned around, her expression broke my heart all over again. "Dale, wait. I need to tell you something. About Sarah. About what she's been telling everyone." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. For the past 3 months, while I'd been working myself to exhaustion and missing family gatherings because Harold claimed they were small affairs or adults only, Sarah had been systematically destroying my reputation with carefully crafted lies. She'd called Linda, Patricia, Robert, and even distant relatives I rarely spoke with, painting a picture of me as an irresponsible father who'd abandoned his family, lost jobs due to drinking problems I didn't have, and displayed increasingly erratic behavior that made her fear for her safety. Linda pulled out her phone and showed me text message chains that made my blood run cold. Sarah had sent detailed accounts of supposed incidents where I'd shown up drunk to pick up the children, brought dangerous people around Emma and Tyler, and failed to pay court-ordered child support, despite having copies of every canceled check I'd written sitting in my kitchen drawer. She'd described me as emotionally abusive, claiming I'd threatened her during custody exchanges and was trying to turn the children against her. The most devastating part was learning that every family gathering I'd missed due to scheduling conflicts had been deliberate exclusions. Harold hadn't been trying to spare me additional stress during a difficult time. He'd been protecting the family from what he believed was my dangerous instability. The grandfather who'd taught me to build birdhouses in his workshop, who'd attended every high school baseball game I'd played, who'd given me the confidence to propose to Sarah in the first place, had written me off based on the word of a woman who'd proven herself capable of abandoning her own children when something better came along. Standing in my childhood driveway while Emma and Tyler waited in the truck, I finally understood why Sarah rarely used her court-ordered visitation time. She wasn't too busy building her new life with Marcus. She was too busy destroying mine. Every missed weekend with the children, every canceled phone call, every holiday that came and went without contact had been strategic moves in a game I didn't even know I was playing. The irony was suffocating. While I'd been beating myself up for not being the perfect single father, for struggling to balance work and parenting, for sometimes serving cereal for dinner because I was too exhausted to cook, Sarah had been telling everyone that I was the problem. She'd taken my genuine efforts to maintain stability for Emma and Tyler and twisted them into evidence of my inadequacy. As I drove away from Harold's house with my children asking increasingly heartbreaking questions about why their extended family didn't want to see them, I realized that Sarah's betrayal went far beyond leaving me for another man. She'd systematically dismantled the support system my children needed, isolated them from grandparents and cousins who should have been celebrating their milestones and offering unconditional love. She'd weaponized family relationships in a way that would have lasting consequences far beyond our divorce. I drove to Riverside Park, the same place where Harold had taught me to throw a baseball 25 years earlier. The November air was crisp, and most of the other families had gone home for their own holiday celebrations, leaving us virtually alone among the bare oak trees and empty picnic tables. Emma and Tyler climbed onto the playground equipment while I sat on a bench, trying to process the magnitude of what Linda had revealed. My marriage to Sarah had started like a fairy tale. We'd met during our junior year at State University, where she was studying marketing and I was finishing my construction management degree. She was beautiful, ambitious, and seemed fascinated by my practical approach to life. While her sorority sisters dated fraternity boys who talked about their father's law firms and country club memberships, Sarah chose the guy who worked construction jobs during summer breaks and understood the value of earning every dollar. The early years were genuinely happy. We'd married right after graduation in a small ceremony at Harold's house, with Sarah looking radiant in her grandmother's vintage dress, and me wearing the only suit I owned. Harold had walked her down the aisle when her own father couldn't make the trip from California, and his toast that evening about gaining a daughter had brought tears to everyone's eyes. Sarah seemed to love our simple life. Sunday dinners at Harold's house, camping trips instead of expensive vacations, and the cozy apartment we'd rented near the construction company where I'd landed my first real job. Emma arrived 2 years later, and Sarah transformed into a devoted mother who read parenting books cover to cover and documented every milestone with professional quality photographs. She'd been the one to suggest we start saving for a house, and she'd spent months researching neighborhoods with excellent schools and family-friendly amenities. When Tyler was born 3 years after Emma, our little family felt complete and perfectly balanced. The changes started gradually, after Tyler's second birthday. Sarah began making comments about our friends who seemed to have more disposable income, questioning why I wasn't pursuing management positions that might offer better advancement opportunities. She'd scroll through social media, showing me photographs of her college roommates' houses, their luxury cars, their exotic vacation destinations. What started as casual observations became pointed suggestions, then frustrated arguments about my limited ambitions and lack of drive. The final year of our marriage was a slow-motion disaster. Sarah had returned to work part-time at a marketing firm downtown, claiming she needed intellectual stimulation beyond mommy groups and playground conversations. She started staying late for important client meetings, buying expensive clothes that our budget couldn't accommodate, and making new friends whose lifestyles made our middle-class existence seem shabby by comparison. When she met Marcus at a company networking event, I could see her fascination with his stories about international business trips, his downtown loft with city views, and his casual attitude toward spending money on whatever struck his fancy. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday morning while I was getting Emma ready for school. Sarah had moved out the previous weekend while I was working a landscaping job, taking only her personal belongings and leaving behind the life we'd built together like it meant nothing. The legal language cited irreconcilable differences, but the real issue was that Marcus represented everything Sarah had decided she wanted, while I represented everything she'd outgrown. At the park, watching Emma push Tyler on the swings while they laughed despite the morning's trauma, I marveled at their resilience. They'd adjusted to the divorce with remarkable grace, never complaining about our smaller apartment or simpler meals, never making me feel guilty for the ways their lives had changed. Emma had become my little helper, setting the table for dinner and reading bedtime stories to Tyler when I worked late. Tyler had developed an independence that impressed his kindergarten teachers, packing his own backpack and remembering his library books without constant reminders. My phone buzzed with a text message from Harold that changed everything. "We need to talk. Come to my workshop behind the house. Alone. Bring the kids inside first. Linda will watch them." Something in his tone suggested this wasn't over. Despite wanting to drive away and never return, I found myself heading back to Harold's house, where Linda met us at the front door, with apologetic hugs for Emma and Tyler, and promises of hot chocolate and cartoon movies in the den. The extended family had apparently left, giving us privacy for whatever conversation Harold needed to have. Walking to Harold's workshop felt like traveling back in time. This weathered building behind the house had been my sanctuary during childhood, the place where Harold had taught me to measure twice and cut once, where we'd built Emma's dollhouse and Tyler's toy chest, where we'd had our most important father-son conversations about growing up, making mistakes, and becoming a man worth respecting. Harold stood with his back to me, organizing tools with the same methodical precision he'd demonstrated throughout my childhood. When he turned around, his face showed an emotional exhaustion that made him look older than his 68 years. The confidence and righteousness he'd displayed during the morning's confrontation had been replaced by something that looked suspiciously like shame. "I hired a private investigator 3 weeks ago," he said without preamble, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know Sarah's been lying about everything. I've been a fool, and I'm sorry." He handed me a thick manila folder that contained evidence of my innocence and Sarah's deception. Bank records proving my consistent child support payments, school documents listing me as the primary emergency contact for both children, and social media screenshots showing Sarah and Marcus enjoying expensive vacations while she claimed to be struggling financially as a single mother. Page after page of documentation that painted a picture completely opposite to the narrative Sarah had been spreading. The deeper revelation was even more painful. Harold admitted he'd suspected Sarah was lying for months, noticing inconsistencies in her stories and feeling uncomfortable with some of her more dramatic claims. But he'd been terrified that confronting her would result in losing access to Emma and Tyler completely. In his mind, staying neutral and maintaining relationships with everyone was the safest way to protect his connection to his grandchildren. I've been torn between protecting my son and protecting my relationship with those babies, he said, his voice cracking with emotion. I made the wrong choice. I abandoned you when you needed me most, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. The workshop conversation revealed Harold's deeper fears about fatherhood and family legacy. He confessed to feeling guilty about not being emotionally available during my childhood, working long hours to provide financial stability while missing opportunities to offer guidance and support during my teenage years. When my marriage fell apart, he'd been desperate to avoid repeating those mistakes with Emma and Tyler, even if it meant sacrificing his relationship with me. As we talked among the familiar smells of sawdust and wood stain, I began to understand that Harold's morning rejection hadn't been about choosing Sarah over me. It had been about a grandfather's misguided attempt to protect his grandchildren from what he'd been led to believe was a dangerous situation. His investigation into Sarah's claims had revealed not just her lies, but his own failure to trust the son he'd raised to be honest and responsible. She picked the wrong family to mess with, Harold said, his voice regaining some of its familiar strength. We're going to make this right, Dale. All of it. Returning to Harold's house felt like entering a completely different world. Linda had rallied the extended family, and instead of the uncomfortable tension that had dominated the morning, the living room buzzed with indignant energy. Aunt Patricia sat at the dining room table with the evidence folder spread before her, shaking her head in disgust as she read through Sarah's fabricated accusations. Uncle Robert paced near the fireplace, muttering about being manipulated by someone he'd welcomed into the family with open arms. Emma and Tyler were curled up on the couch watching a Pixar movie, blissfully unaware that their entire family dynamic was being reconstructed around them. Seeing them comfortable and safe in Harold's house, laughing at animated characters and sharing a bowl of popcorn Linda had prepared, reminded me of countless childhood afternoons when this living room had been my refuge from whatever problems the outside world presented. Patricia approached me with tears in her eyes and an apology that cut straight to my heart. I never fully believed Sarah's stories, she admitted, but I felt pressured to stay neutral. You've been like a son to me since you were Emma's age, and I should have trusted what I knew about your character instead of letting doubt creep in. Robert's confession was even more painful. He'd always been the uncle who showed up for my baseball games, taught me to change my own oil, and offered practical advice about everything from job interviews to home repairs. Those accusations never sounded like the Dale I helped raise, he said, but Sarah was so convincing, so detailed in her stories. I thought maybe the stress of single parenthood had changed you in ways we couldn't see. My cousin Jenny, who'd seemed so distant and suspicious during the morning brunch, now looked mortified by her earlier behavior. She'd been receiving regular updates from Sarah about my supposed decline into irresponsible behavior, complete with manufactured evidence, like photos of empty beer bottles that were supposedly from my apartment and screenshots of text messages I'd never sent. The manipulation had been so thorough, so professionally executed, that even people who'd known me my entire life had begun to question their own judgment. Harold made an announcement that restored some of his familiar authority. We owe Dale a massive apology, and we're going to spend however long it takes making this right. Sarah has been lying to all of us, playing us against each other, and using our love for Emma and Tyler as a weapon. That ends today. The family's transformation was remarkable. Within minutes, they'd gone from awkward strangers back to the supportive network that had sustained me throughout childhood. Patricia began planning ways to rebuild relationships with Emma and Tyler. Robert offered to help with any legal expenses I might face, and Jenny started documenting the false information Sarah had shared with her over social media. My phone rang unexpectedly, displaying Marcus's name on the screen. The family fell silent as I debated whether to answer. Marcus had never contacted me directly since he'd started dating Sarah, and his timing seemed suspiciously coincidental. Against Harold's advice, I decided to hear what he had to say. Dale, this is Marcus. I know this is going to sound strange, but I need to meet with you today. Alone. It's about Sarah, and it's urgent. Something in his voice suggested genuine desperation rather than manipulation. We arranged to meet at Corner Cafe, a neutral location near Harold's house, where we could talk without interruption. As I prepared to leave, Harold offered to accompany me, but I sensed this conversation needed to happen without family backup. Marcus looked terrible. The confident, well-dressed businessman Sarah had described in such glowing terms appeared haggard and exhausted, like he hadn't slept properly in weeks. He'd arrived before me and chosen a corner table where our conversation wouldn't be overheard, his hands wrapped around a coffee cup like he was trying to warm himself from some internal chill. "I owe you an apology," he began, "not just for what Sarah has put you through, but for being blind to who she really is. I've been secretly recording our conversations for the past month because I suspected she was unstable, and I needed to protect myself legally. What I discovered is worse than I ever imagined." He pulled out his phone and played audio recordings that shattered any remaining illusions about Sarah's motivations. Her voice, clear and unmistakable, bragged about manipulating my family relationships, laughed about the financial damage she was causing through identity theft, and admitted that she'd never loved Marcus. She was simply using him for his money and social status until something better came along. The most damning recording captured Sarah's true feelings about our children. "Emma and Tyler are just leverage. Dale will do whatever I want as long as he thinks it affects them. By the time I'm done, he'll lose his kids, his family, his reputation, everything. He should have appreciated what he had when he had it." Marcus played additional recordings, revealing Sarah's master plan to frame him for domestic violence once she'd secured permanent custody of the children and maximized her financial settlement. She'd been documenting non-existent injuries, saving threatening text messages she'd sent to herself from burner phones, and building a case that would destroy both of our lives while positioning herself as the innocent victim of two dangerous men. "She's not just vengeful," Marcus said, his voice hollow with exhaustion. "She's genuinely dangerous. This isn't about getting back at you for some perceived wrong. This is about power, control, and money. She's been planning this destruction for months, maybe longer." The evidence Marcus provided was overwhelming. Financial documents showing Sarah's excessive spending on designer clothes and luxury treatments while claiming poverty in court filings. Email chains detailing her manipulation strategies, complete with timelines for implementing different phases of her plan. Recorded phone calls where she coached Emma and Tyler to repeat negative stories about me, promising them toys and special treats if they told Mommy about bad things Daddy does. Most horrifying were the recordings where Sarah discussed her long-term strategy: destroy my relationship with my family, eliminate my financial stability through identity theft, and gain complete control of the children by making me appear unfit and dangerous. She'd researched family court procedures, studied other custody cases, and approached my destruction with the same methodical precision she'd once applied to marketing campaigns. Marcus explained his own situation with painful honesty. He'd initially been attracted to Sarah's beauty and apparent vulnerability, seeing himself as rescuing a struggling single mother from an irresponsible ex-husband. But as their relationship progressed, he'd noticed inconsistencies in her stories, mood swings that seemed calculated rather than emotional, and a coldness toward Emma and Tyler that disturbed him deeply. "I genuinely care about your children," Marcus admitted. "They're sweet, innocent kids who deserve better than being used as weapons." When I realized what Sarah was planning to do to me, I also realized what she'd already done to you. I can't live with being part of that destruction. His offer to help came with risks for both of us. By providing evidence of Sarah's manipulation, he was positioning himself as a target for her retribution. But he'd reached the point where protecting himself and the children mattered more than avoiding conflict with someone he now recognized as genuinely dangerous. As we prepared to leave the cafe, Marcus handed me a USB drive containing all the recorded evidence. "She's not going to stop until one of us destroys her ability to hurt people," he said. "I vote we make sure it happens before she destroys any more lives." The drive back to Harold's house felt surreal. I possessed evidence that would not only clear my name, but potentially put Sarah in prison for multiple felonies. The children I'd been fighting to protect were safe with their grandfather, surrounded by family members who were finally aware of the truth. For the first time in months, I felt like I might actually win the battle for my family's future. Harold's living room had transformed into an impromptu war room by the time I returned with Marcus's evidence. Attorney Patricia Walsh, a family law specialist Harold had contacted through his personal network, was already reviewing the documentation we'd gathered earlier. She looked up from her laptop as I handed her the USB drive, her expression shifting from professional concentration to barely contained outrage as she listened to the first few recordings. "This is one of the most comprehensive fraud and manipulation cases I've seen in 20 years of practice," she said after reviewing Marcus's evidence. "Sarah has committed multiple felonies, including identity theft, perjury, filing false police reports, and child exploitation. She's facing serious prison time, and there's no question about your custody rights." Emma and Tyler remained happily occupied in Harold's den, building elaborate structures with the same wooden blocks I'd played with during my own childhood. Their voices carried softly into the living room as they negotiated architectural decisions and assigned roles for the miniature people who would inhabit their creation. The normalcy of their play provided a stark contrast to the serious legal discussions happening around them. Attorney Walsh outlined our strategy with military precision. We would document every piece of evidence, coordinate with local police to file criminal charges against Sarah for fraud and identity theft, and petition for immediate modification of the custody arrangement based on evidence of child manipulation and emotional abuse. The case was so strong, so thoroughly documented, that she expected rapid resolution in our favor. Harold pulled me aside for the conversation I'd been both dreading and needing since childhood. "Son, I need you to know that the biggest regret of my life is not standing by you from the beginning," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I failed you as a father when you were growing up by working too much and being emotionally unavailable. When your marriage fell apart, I was terrified of making those same mistakes with Emma and Tyler. But in trying to protect them, I abandoned you when you needed me most." His admission opened floodgates I hadn't realized I'd been holding back. For months, I'd been carrying the weight of single parenthood, financial stress, and family rejection without understanding why the people who'd raised me had suddenly turned against me. Learning that Harold's distance had been motivated by misguided protectiveness rather than genuine disappointment helped heal wounds I'd assumed were permanent. I should have trusted my own son over a woman who'd already proven she could walk away from her family when something better came along, Harold continued. I should have investigated her claims instead of taking them at face value. Most importantly, I should have been here supporting you through the hardest time of your life instead of making it worse. The family began planning how to rebuild our relationships. Patricia organized a schedule for regular family dinners where Emma and Tyler could reconnect with their extended family. Robert offered to resume our traditional fishing trips, this time including Tyler, who was old enough to handle a basic rod and reel. Jenny started creating a photo album of all the family events we'd missed, planning to fill it with new memories as we moved forward. As afternoon faded into evening, car doors slammed outside with an urgency that made everyone freeze. Through the living room windows, we could see Sarah's silver sedan in the driveway, with Sarah herself storming toward the front door and Marcus trailing reluctantly behind her. Her face showed a rage I'd never seen before, and her body language suggested she'd come for a confrontation rather than a civil conversation. Sarah burst through the front door without knocking, her voice echoing through the house as she demanded to know where Emma and Tyler were. "Where are my children?" she screamed. "What kind of sick game are you people playing? I'm calling the police right now for kidnapping." The family's reaction surprised her. Instead of the usual scrambling and intimidation she'd grown accustomed to, everyone remained calm and united. Patricia sat quietly at the dining room table. Harold stood with his arms crossed near the fireplace, and Linda continued folding laundry, as if Sarah's dramatic entrance was nothing more than mild entertainment. "We know everything, Sarah," Harold announced with quiet authority. "The lying, the manipulation, the fraud. It stops today." Sarah's shock was visible as she realized her usual tactics weren't working. She'd expected to find me isolated and defensive, ready to cave to her demands, rather than risk a public scene. Instead, she encountered a family that had closed ranks around the truth, armed with evidence that made her accusations powerless. Her desperation escalated as she doubled down on her fabricated stories, not realizing that every word she spoke was being recorded by Attorney Walsh's phone and compared to the evidence we'd already gathered. She accused me of kidnapping my own children, claimed Harold was participating in a conspiracy against her, and threatened legal action against everyone present. Marcus's betrayal moment came when Sarah turned to him for support and found none. Instead of backing up her story, he quietly handed me an additional USB drive containing even more recorded evidence of her manipulation. "I'm done being part of this, Sarah," he said. "These people deserve the truth." Sarah's meltdown was spectacular and heartbreaking simultaneously. As she realized she'd been completely outmaneuvered, her accusations became increasingly wild and disconnected from reality. She claimed we were all working together to destroy her life, that she was the real victim of a coordinated attack by people who'd never accepted her as part of the family. The most devastating part was watching Emma and Tyler witness their mother's complete loss of control. They emerged from the den, drawn by her shouting, only to see the woman who'd been coaching them to lie about their father dissolving into hysterical accusations and threats. The contrast between their calm, stable father and their emotionally volatile mother was impossible to ignore. When Sarah demanded that the children leave with her immediately, Emma and Tyler instinctively moved closer to me. Tyler slipped his small hand into mine, while Emma asked quietly if we could stay with Daddy and Grandpa Harold. Their response spoke louder than any legal testimony about where they felt safest and most secure. Sarah's rage turned toward the children, and for a moment, the mask slipped completely. "You two need to come with me right now," she snapped at Emma and Tyler. "Stop acting like your father is some kind of hero. He's the reason our family is broken." The room fell silent, except for Tyler's quiet crying and Emma's whispered question about why Mommy was being so mean. In that moment, everyone present could see exactly what kind of psychological damage Sarah had been inflicting on two innocent children who deserved love and stability instead of manipulation and emotional warfare. Sarah's confidence returned temporarily as she pulled out her phone, dialing 911 with theatrical flair. "I'm reporting a kidnapping," she announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "My ex-husband has taken my children and won't return them." Harold's calm response deflated her drama immediately. "Go ahead and call them, Sarah. We already did." The sound of approaching sirens made Sarah's face shift from righteous indignation to sudden uncertainty. She'd been so focused on executing her planned confrontation that she hadn't considered the possibility that we might be several steps ahead of her strategy. 2 police cars and a Child Protective Services vehicle turned into Harold's driveway with the precise timing that suggested coordination rather than coincidence. Detective James Murphy entered Harold's house with an authority that immediately shifted the room's dynamic. Sarah straightened her shoulders and prepared to launch into her victim narrative, but Detective Murphy's first words stopped her cold. "Sarah Elizabeth Morrison, you're under arrest for identity theft, fraud, and filing false police reports." The moment stretched into surreal silence as Sarah processed that the police had come for her rather than me. Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly, her carefully constructed version of reality crashing into the legal consequences of months of criminal behavior. Attorney Walsh stepped forward to present Detective Murphy with our comprehensive evidence package, including bank records, forged documents, and Marcus's recorded confessions. As Detective Murphy read Sarah her rights, her composure shattered completely. She screamed accusations at everyone present, claiming we'd all conspired against her, that the police were corrupt, that the evidence was fabricated. Her increasingly hysterical denials only reinforced the documentation of her unstable behavior patterns that we'd been gathering for weeks. Child Protective Services worker Anna Rodriguez took Emma and Tyler to Linda's bedroom for private interviews, where their innocent honesty revealed the full extent of Sarah's psychological manipulation. Emma admitted that Mommy had promised her a new bicycle if she told people Daddy was mean to them. Tyler revealed that Mommy said Daddy didn't love them anymore, and that's why they couldn't see Grandpa Harold. The children's testimony was heartbreaking in its simplicity. They described months of coaching sessions where Sarah taught them specific phrases to repeat about their father's supposed shortcomings. They talked about being promised treats and toys for remembering to tell negative stories, and being scolded when they defended me or expressed happiness about our time together. Anna Rodriguez, a seasoned CPS professional who'd seen every variation of family dysfunction, emerged from the interviews with a grim expression and an immediate recommendation for emergency custody modification. These children have been subjected to systematic psychological manipulation, she told Attorney Walsh. Their emotional safety requires immediate removal from the manipulative parent's influence. Marcus provided additional testimony that sealed Sarah's fate. He shared recordings of Sarah verbally abusing Emma and Tyler when they refused to repeat negative stories about me, audio evidence of her coaching them to lie to school counselors about their home life, and documentation of her threatening to send them away to boarding school if they didn't cooperate with her plans. As handcuffs were applied to Sarah's wrists, her accusations became increasingly desperate and disconnected from reality. She claimed that everyone from Harold to Detective Murphy was part of my conspiracy against her, that the evidence was fabricated, that she was being framed by people who'd never accepted her as part of the family. Emma and Tyler watched their mother's arrest with expressions of relief rather than distress. Instead of crying for mommy or begging the police to stop, they seemed to understand on some instinctive level that the shouting and chaos that had dominated their lives was finally ending. Tyler asked quietly if this meant mommy wouldn't yell at us anymore, while Emma wondered if we could have dinner at Grandpa's house without being afraid. Detective Murphy publicly apologized for the department's failure to investigate Sarah's false reports more thoroughly. "We receive a lot of domestic dispute calls," he explained, "and unfortunately, we took her accusations at face value instead of looking deeper into the evidence. I'm sorry your family went through this ordeal because of our oversight." Harold's vindication moment came as Sarah was led toward the police car. He stood beside me with his arm around my shoulders, finally taking the public stand he should have taken months ago. "This is my son," he announced to Detective Murphy, "and he's one of the best fathers I've ever known. I should have trusted him from the beginning." The extended family formed a united front on Harold's front porch, every relative present, confirming their willingness to testify on my behalf if legal proceedings required character witnesses. Patricia hugged Emma and Tyler, promising them that their family would never abandon them again. Robert shook my hand with the firm grip that had symbolized respect and approval throughout my childhood. Jenny took photos of the children with their grandfather, documenting the reunion that should have happened months earlier. Attorney Walsh explained Sarah's likely legal future as we watched the police cars disappear down the street. Identity theft and fraud charges typically carry 2 to 5 years in prison. Given the extensive documentation of her crimes and the manipulation of minor children, she'll likely serve the full sentence and lose all custody rights permanently. As evening settled over Harold's house, Emma and Tyler played contentedly in the living room where I'd spent countless childhood hours. They built new structures with the wooden blocks, told stories about brave knights and kind dragons, and basked in the attention of grandparents and relatives who were determined to make up for months of lost time. Standing in Harold's kitchen while Linda prepared hot chocolate for the children, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced since before my marriage began falling apart. The legal nightmare was ending, my family relationships were restored, and my children were safe from the psychological manipulation that had been damaging their emotional development. The day that had started with devastating rejection had become the foundation for rebuilding everything Sarah had tried to destroy. Harold approached me as I watched Emma and Tyler through the kitchen doorway, their laughter filling the house with the joy that had been missing for too long. "I failed you once, son," he said quietly. "I won't make that mistake again. Whatever you and those children need, whatever it takes to rebuild what we lost, I'm here for all of it." 6 months later, the transformation of our lives felt like stepping into an entirely different story. I stood in the kitchen of our new house, a modest 3-bedroom ranch that Harold had helped me purchase in the same neighborhood where I'd grown up, watching Emma and Tyler eat breakfast before school. The morning routine had become something I treasured rather than endured, full of conversations about upcoming spelling tests, playground friendships, and weekend plans with their grandfather. Sarah was serving an 18-month prison sentence after pleading guilty to multiple felony charges, including identity theft, fraud, perjury, and child endangerment. The plea bargain had spared Emma and Tyler the trauma of testifying in court, but it also meant Sarah had permanently lost all custody and visitation rights. She would be eligible for supervised phone calls once she completed a psychological evaluation and anger management program, but her parental authority was legally terminated. The legal resolution had been swift once all evidence was presented to the court. Judge Patricia Martinez, who specialized in family law cases, had reviewed Marcus's recordings, the private investigator's findings, and the children's interviews with child psychologists before declaring Sarah's behavior a systematic campaign of psychological warfare against innocent children and their father. The identity theft charges alone carried enough weight to ensure significant prison time, but the evidence of child manipulation had outraged the judge and resulted in maximum sentencing within legal guidelines. My professional life had flourished alongside my personal recovery. With Harold's encouragement and financial support, I'd returned to school for engineering classes while maintaining my construction work. The combination of practical experience and formal education had led to a promotion as project supervisor with excellent benefits, stable hours, and the kind of career growth that would provide long-term security for my family. Harold had transformed into the grandfather he'd always wanted to be, but hadn't known how to become. He attended every school concert, soccer game, and parent-teacher conference, making up for the months of lost time with dedication that amazed Emma and Tyler's teachers. His workshop had become their weekend sanctuary, where they learned to use tools safely, built birdhouses for the backyard, and listened to stories about their father's childhood adventures. The children's psychological healing had been remarkable to witness. Weekly therapy sessions with Dr. Rachel Stevens, a child psychologist who specialized in parental manipulation cases, had helped Emma and Tyler process their confusing experiences and develop healthy emotional responses. They'd learned to express their feelings honestly, instead of calculating what adults wanted to hear, and they'd regained the spontaneous joy that had been suppressed during months of walking on eggshells around their mother. Emma had become more confident and assertive, no longer afraid to share her opinions or ask for what she needed. Her teachers noted improvements in her classroom participation and her willingness to form new friendships. Tyler had developed a sense of security that allowed him to take appropriate risks, like trying out for the school play and joining the junior soccer league, where he'd discovered a natural athletic ability. Marcus had become an unexpected but valued friend to our family. His testimony against Sarah had required courage, and his ongoing support during the legal proceedings had demonstrated genuine character growth. He'd used his business connections to help me network within the engineering community, and he'd become a positive male role model for Emma and Tyler, who demonstrated healthy relationship dynamics without the manipulation they'd experienced with their mother. The extended family had embraced their roles as active participants in the children's lives. Aunt Patricia had resumed her tradition of taking Emma shopping for special occasions, teaching her to bake family recipes, and sharing stories about our family history. Uncle Robert had restarted our fishing expeditions, now including Tyler, who'd proven to be a patient and enthusiastic student of outdoor skills. Cousin Jenny had become particularly close to Emma, serving as the older sister figure she'd missed during the chaos of the divorce and custody battles. Their relationship bridged the generational gap in ways that enriched both of their lives, with Jenny providing contemporary perspectives on growing up while Emma offered the innocent wisdom that only children possess. The weekly family dinners at Harold's house had become sacred traditions that anchored our rebuilt relationships. Sunday afternoons found us gathered around the same dining room table where I'd been rejected months earlier, now sharing laughter, planning vacation trips, and celebrating milestones that had been overshadowed during the darkest period of our family's history. Linda had taken on the role of surrogate mother figure for Emma and Tyler, providing the feminine guidance and emotional support that Sarah's absence had created. Her own children, now teenagers, had embraced their younger cousins with protective affection that reminded me of my own childhood relationships with my extended family. The house I'd purchased sat on 2 acres of land that allowed Emma and Tyler to experience the kind of childhood freedom I remembered from growing up in the same area. They built tree forts, planted vegetable gardens, and learned to care for the family dog, a golden retriever named Scout, who'd been Harold's gift to celebrate our new beginning. My own personal growth had been as significant as my children's healing. Months of therapy with Dr. Michael Torres, who specialized in helping men navigate divorce and custody battles, had taught me to recognize manipulation tactics, trust my own judgment, and build healthy boundaries in all relationships. The experience of being systematically betrayed and then vindicated had strengthened my confidence in my own character and my ability to protect my family. The financial stability that came with my career advancement allowed us to enjoy experiences that had been impossible during the struggle of single parenthood on a construction worker's salary. We took weekend camping trips, attended baseball games in the city, and saved money for a vacation to Yellowstone National Park that would give Emma and Tyler memories to treasure throughout their lives. Community recognition of my character had been restored through word-of-mouth testimonials from family members, friends, and colleagues who'd witnessed my dedication as a father and my professionalism as a worker. The reputation Sarah had tried to destroy had been rebuilt stronger than before, based on demonstrated actions rather than superficial appearances. My relationship with Harold had deepened beyond the typical father-son dynamic into genuine friendship and mutual respect. Our conversations in his workshop covered everything from parenting strategies to career decisions to philosophical questions about forgiveness and redemption. He'd become not just a supportive father, but a trusted advisor whose wisdom had been earned through his own mistakes and growth. The legal proceedings had established clear precedents that protected our family's future. Sarah's conviction created a permanent record that would prevent her from filing frivolous custody motions or harassment charges. The identity theft resolution had restored my credit rating and provided financial compensation for the damages she'd caused. Looking back on the holiday brunch that had started our journey toward truth and reconciliation, I recognized that Sarah's dramatic confrontation had actually been a gift in disguise. Without her public rejection of me in Harold's dining room, Linda might never have found the courage to reveal the lies that had been poisoning our family relationships. The crisis had forced everyone to choose sides based on evidence rather than assumptions, and the people who truly loved Emma, Tyler, and me had chosen correctly. The children's relationship with their mother would remain complicated throughout their lives, but they'd been spared the ongoing psychological manipulation that could have caused permanent emotional damage. Dr. Lon Stevens had assured me that children are remarkably resilient when provided with stable, loving environments, and that Emma and Tyler's early experiences with chaos would make them appreciate the security and honesty that defined their current lives. As I prepared breakfast for Emma and Tyler on this ordinary Tuesday morning, listening to their excited chatter about school projects and playground games, I marveled at how completely our lives had been transformed. The man who'd felt isolated and defeated 6 months earlier had been replaced by someone who understood his own worth, recognized genuine support systems, and possessed the tools to protect his family from future manipulation. The greatest lesson of our ordeal had been learning to distinguish between people who claim to love you and people who actually demonstrate love through their actions. Sarah's version of love had been possessive, conditional, and ultimately destructive. Harold's love, despite his temporary failures, had proven to be protective, unconditional, and willing to admit mistakes. The difference between manipulation and genuine care had become crystal clear through lived experience rather than theoretical understanding. 1 year to the day after Harold had rejected me at that devastating holiday brunch, I stood in the same dining room preparing for another family gathering. But this time, I was the one setting the table, arranging centerpieces, and welcoming relatives into a home where love had been tested, proved genuine, and strengthened beyond its original foundation. Emma helped me fold napkins with the careful precision Harold had taught her in his workshop, while Tyler arranged the silverware in patterns that made perfect sense to his 8-year-old logic. Their comfort in this house, their excitement about seeing their extended family, and their secure knowledge that they belonged here, represented a complete reversal of the trauma they'd experienced 12 months earlier. Harold arrived first, carrying a pumpkin pie Linda had baked, and wearing the smile that had become his default expression whenever Emma and Tyler were involved. The grandfather who'd once feared losing his grandchildren by supporting their father had discovered that loving them completely meant protecting their relationship with me rather than trying to maintain neutrality in an impossible blank situation. "This feels different," Harold said, as he surveyed the dining room where our family's crisis had reached its breaking point. "Better. Like we finally got it right." Patricia and Robert arrived with their spouses, their grandchildren, and apologies they'd stopped offering months ago because forgiveness had been freely given and repeatedly demonstrated through changed behavior. The family that had been manipulated into temporary division now understood that unity meant supporting truth rather than avoiding conflict. Jenny brought her husband and their new baby, a 6-month-old daughter who would grow up knowing Emma and Tyler as beloved older cousins rather than distant relatives whose father was unwelcome at family gatherings. The generational healing that had taken place would benefit children who weren't even born when Sarah's lies were poisoning our relationships. Marcus attended as well, bringing his new girlfriend Catherine, a kindergarten teacher whose genuine warmth toward Emma and Tyler demonstrated the difference between healthy relationships and the calculated manipulation that had characterized Sarah's interactions with our family. Marcus had learned to recognize authentic emotions in himself and others, making him a better partner and a more trustworthy friend. Linda coordinated the meal with the same organizational skills that had helped her navigate our family crisis, but now her efficiency came from joy rather than emergency management. She'd resumed her role as the family member who remembered everyone's birthdays, coordinated holiday celebrations, and maintained the communication networks that kept us connected between formal gatherings. As we gathered around Harold's dining room table, I looked at each face and remembered the different expressions they'd worn during our darkest period. Patricia's guilt had been replaced by grandmotherly pride. Robert's uncertainty had evolved into solid support. Jenny's suspicion had transformed into protective affection for her younger cousins. Emma and Tyler sat between Harold and me, their conversation bouncing between school adventures and plans for the treehouse. Harold was helping them design for our backyard. Their emotional security was evident in their willingness to disagree with adults about minor preferences, their comfortable physical affection with family members, and their ability to express feelings honestly without calculating the response they might receive. The meal progressed with the easy conversation that characterizes families who've survived crisis together. We talked about Robert's retirement plans, Jenny's promotion at work, Patricia's volunteer activities at the community center, and Linda's preparations for Thanksgiving dinner the following week. Normal life concerns had replaced the emergency management that had dominated our interactions during the legal proceedings. Harold stood as we finished the main course, raising his glass of apple cider in a toast that brought tears to my eyes. "1 year ago, I made the worst mistake of my life in this very room," he said, his voice carrying the strength that comes from acknowledged error and demonstrated change. "I let fear and manipulation convince me to turn against my own son when he needed me most. Dale, I want everyone here to know that you're not just a good father. You're the kind of man I hope to raise, and I'm proud to be your dad." The applause that followed wasn't polite social convention, but genuine celebration of growth, forgiveness, and restored relationships. Emma and Tyler joined in enthusiastically, understanding that something important was being acknowledged even if they couldn't grasp all the complexities involved. After dinner, while the adults lingered over coffee and the children played in Harold's backyard, Marcus approached me with an update that provided closure to the final chapter of Sarah's story. Her appeals for early release had been denied, and her attempts to contact Emma and Tyler through intermediaries had been blocked by court order. The legal protections we'd established were holding firm, ensuring that our rebuilt family stability couldn't be undermined by future manipulation attempts. "She's still trying to convince anyone who'll listen that she's the victim," Marcus said, "but her credibility is completely destroyed. The psychological evaluations show no progress toward taking responsibility for her actions. If anything, prison has made her more convinced that everyone else was wrong." Dr. Stevens had prepared me for this possibility during our family counseling sessions. Some people who engage in systematic manipulation never develop the capacity for genuine self-reflection or remorse. Sarah's inability to acknowledge the damage she'd caused meant that she would always represent a potential threat to our family's well-being, which was why the permanent legal restrictions were so important. Emma and Tyler's relationship with Sarah would remain legally severed until they reached adulthood and could make their own decisions about contact. Dr. Stevens had helped me develop age-appropriate explanations for why their mother couldn't be part of their lives, focusing on safety and emotional health rather than punishment or revenge. As the evening wound down and relatives prepared to leave, Emma approached me with a question that demonstrated how completely her emotional security had been restored. "Daddy, can we have Christmas morning at our house this year? I want Grandpa Harold to see our tree and help Tyler and me open presents." Her request represented everything our family had fought to rebuild. Children who felt safe asking for what they wanted, confidence that their needs would be considered seriously, and trust that the adults in their lives would prioritize their happiness over convenience or tradition. Harold's response confirmed that he understood the significance of Emma's invitation. "I'd be honored to spend Christmas morning at your house," he said. "Your dad and I can make breakfast while you and Tyler show us everything Santa brought." The casual planning of future celebrations marked our complete transition from crisis management to normal family life. We were no longer rebuilding what had been damaged. We were creating new traditions and memories that reflected who we'd become through surviving betrayal, manipulation, and temporary family division. As I tucked Emma and Tyler into their beds that night in our own home, listening to their prayers that included gratitude for Grandpa Harold, Aunt Linda, and all the relatives who loved them, I reflected on the lessons that our ordeal had taught us all. The most important realization was that genuine love requires courage. Harold's temporary abandonment of me had been motivated by fear rather than malice, but fear had made him vulnerable to manipulation by someone who understood how to exploit his devotion to his grandchildren. True family loyalty meant seeking truth even when it was uncomfortable, standing up for what was right even when it created conflict, and trusting the character of people who'd proven themselves through years of consistent behavior. Sarah's betrayal had also taught me to recognize the difference between love and control. Her version of caring had been conditional on my compliance with her expectations and demands. When I couldn't provide the lifestyle she wanted, she'd systematically tried to destroy everything I valued most. Real love, as demonstrated by Harold's eventual support, meant accepting people as they were, while encouraging them to become their best selves. The children had learned that adults sometimes make serious mistakes, but that good people acknowledge their errors and work to make things right. They'd seen their grandfather admit he was wrong, change his behavior, and commit to never repeating the same failure. They'd witnessed the difference between people who blamed others for their problems and people who took responsibility for their actions. My own growth had been perhaps the most significant. The experience of being systematically betrayed and then vindicated had taught me to trust my own judgment while remaining open to feedback from people who'd proven their commitment to my well-being. I'd learned to recognize manipulation tactics, establish healthy boundaries, and distinguish between criticism that was meant to help me grow and attacks that were designed to control or diminish me. The professional consequences had been overwhelmingly positive. Colleagues who'd witnessed my character throughout the legal proceedings had recommended me for advancement opportunities that might have taken years to achieve under normal circumstances. The reputation Sarah had tried to destroy had been rebuilt stronger than before, based on demonstrated resilience under pressure, rather than simply doing my job competently. Our community standing had been enhanced by the way we'd handled the crisis. Friends and neighbors who'd observed our family's journey from chaos to stability had expressed admiration for our ability to rebuild relationships and maintain focus on the children's well-being throughout the legal proceedings. Emma and Tyler's teachers had noted their emotional growth and academic progress as evidence of the healthy home environment we'd created. As I prepared for sleep in the house, Harold had helped me buy, in the neighborhood where I'd grown up, surrounded by family relationships that had been tested and proven genuine. I understood that Sarah's attempt to destroy us had actually strengthened everything she'd tried to take away. Our family bonds were now based on conscious choice and demonstrated commitment rather than simple habit or obligation. The final insight that brought me peace was recognizing that forgiveness didn't require trusting people who'd proven themselves untrustworthy. I could forgive Sarah for the damage she'd caused while maintaining appropriate boundaries to protect my children from future manipulation. I could forgive Harold for his temporary abandonment while holding him accountable for the support he'd promised moving forward. Emma and Tyler would grow up with clear examples of both destructive and healthy relationship patterns. They'd learn that people who truly love them will apologize when they make mistakes, change their behavior to prevent repeating those mistakes, and prioritize the children's well-being over their own convenience or comfort. The story that had begun with devastating rejection in Harold's dining room had evolved into a testament to the power of truth, the importance of family loyalty, and the possibility of rebuilding relationships that had been damaged by outside manipulation. 1 year later, we weren't just surviving, we were thriving in ways that wouldn't have been possible without weathering the crisis that had initially threatened to destroy us. That terrible day had taught me that sometimes you have to lose everything to realize what you truly have. My father hadn't abandoned me. He'd been protecting me in the only way he knew how, even though his method was wrong. When the truth finally emerged, our family became stronger than ever before. Sarah thought she could destroy us, but instead, she just showed us what we're really made of. The greatest gift that came from our ordeal was the knowledge that real family means more than sharing DNA or living in the same house. Real family means standing together when it matters most, seeking truth even when it's uncomfortable, and choosing to love each other despite the mistakes we all make along the way. I want to ask you something that's been on my mind since sharing this story. Have you ever had to choose between keeping peace and standing up for what's right in your own family? How did you find the courage to do what needed to be done? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear about your own experiences with family loyalty and standing up for truth. If this story resonated with you or helped you think about your own family relationships in a new way, please hit that like button to let me know it made a difference. And if you think someone else might benefit from hearing about second chances and the power of forgiveness, please share this story with them. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming challenges, rebuilding relationships, and discovering what really matters when everything else falls apart. Thank you for listening, and I hope your own family finds the strength to choose truth and love over fear and manipulation. Take care, everyone.